All right, good afternoon, everybody. It looks like I'm the man who's standing between you and lunch today. All right, and I think we've been in a great company of a lot of good thinkers, very progressive thinking in the area of mobile research today. And I'd like to contribute a piece in the area of sharing, activating apps in market research. And if I could distill what I'm going to speak about today to one point, and it is that integration, integration, and integration. It is so important that mobile apps research or whatever we do does not stand alone, as a standalone piece of work. Okay. So before I begin, maybe just do a quick introduction of myself. I've been in the industry for about 13 years. A couple of years in a boutique agency, and I was at StarHub, which is a telco in Singapore, before I found the lure of mobile research. Too enticing, and I've gone back to Nielsen now. But really the magic and my love with market research and mobile really started a long time back. When I show this, some people think that I'm just putting up a fake photo or something like that. But this is me as a surveyor with what used to be known as AC Nielsen. And the reason why I show this picture is because back in the 90s, I saw the vision of mobile and research really coming together. And I'm really glad I'm living the dream right now, as all of us are. Okay? So what am I going to speak about today? Firstly, it's really talking about the smartphone revolution, right? Now, we know that there are smartphones and it's growing, but I want to call about what it means, not just smartphones, but it's really an application revolution that we're going through. And how are we going to tap on this technology to really measure our customers' behaviors, and most importantly, to make money, right? So to capitalize on their consumption. So let's go. Okay? Now, we know that Asia is getting smarter, right? This chart from the Nielsen Smartphone Insight shows us that in many of the Asian countries, there are already today more smartphones than feature phones, right? And this data, I have to admit, is about a year old, and we have a new version coming out in about 2 months, and I'm sure Asia would have gotten a lot more smarter than that. Now, within this smartphone revolution, we see that many of the majority of the phones are really an Android or an iOS phone. And what makes these two platforms extremely successful is that they have actually been an app-centric operating system. Okay? And we see that today, in terms of the time spent on apps versus mobile, right, more than 4 in 5 of the time that we spend on mobile internet is really on apps. Okay? Now, today's the 30th of January, tomorrow's 31st. Anyone can tell me something's going to happen tomorrow, product launch. What is that? Anyone? 31st Jan? Yeah, BlackBerry 10 is going to launch tomorrow. And I think RIM got it right, in the sense that they have waited, maybe delayed their launch a little bit, but tomorrow they'll be launching with 100,000 apps. They know that this is the only way they're going to have a chance to really make a splash and become the third mobile operator. Sorry, the third operating system. Okay? The next thing is consumers are driving apps mainstream. Well, some of the other speakers have already shown stuff like that. In that people are using apps really for things that they would do in their everyday lives. Photography, travel, finance, communication. We are essentially using apps for things that we used to do on a PC, and now it's gone mobile, right? These stats are from the United States, but I believe that leading the way, we would see this happening in Asia more and more, and at an accelerated pace. Okay, the next thing is apps are also accelerating the consumer's path to purchase. Like it or not, most people are actually consulting their apps to search for products, to find more about products, to discuss products, and even to buy products. So that's the reason why I feel that we really, really need to be in that space when people are using the phones. Exactly what are they doing on their phones that will help us to connect? And this information needs to be put into the hands of the clients so that they can make strategic decisions on where should they be advertising and how much and on what applications and on what platforms. Okay? And it is very clear today that there's so much time being spent on the mobile, but the market's still lagging behind in terms of the amount of advertising that we spend. While I feel that there is a bit of what we call laggard behavior, right, where people are still a bit cautious, holding on to their spends for mass media, but I also feel that clients out there are crying out for more information. Tell me something that will help me to convince my management that I should be investing so much in mobile applications. Okay? And Nielsen really takes a serious view about this. We believe that mobile really helps us it should be part of an integral part of our strategy to drive brand awareness, to grow brand connection, and really to be present at a point in the customer journey. So I want to address 3 burning questions. Firstly, how can we use mobile to enhance today's insights? Again, it's about integration. It shouldn't be on the standalone platform. Secondly, can we take what we are measuring today and take it one step further to make it a currency so that media buyers would know exactly where they stand, okay? And lastly, apps are great, right? We can talk about having an app. Many companies are coming out to create apps to measure this and that and so on. But how can we actually use that as part of a larger, bigger research picture to give the 360 view of the consumer, right? So I'd like to suggest and share with you 2 case studies from Nielsen. The first is what we call the Nielsen mobile scan, and that takes us out of this room and let's go on a shopping trip together, right? And the next one will be Nielsen Informate Mobile Insights, which is a passive mobile application that measures the user behavior. Okay, so mobile scan. Now, let's start first with the question, how do I track 32 impulse categories for out-of-home purchases? Okay, so, your customers are going out there and they're buying stuff, they're snacking, they're eating, right? And right now, a lot of the consumer packaged goods companies would typically buy retail indices to find out how they're performing in store versus the competitors. They're buying media indices to find out about how their potential users are using media. And with companies like Nielsen, they are also doing what they call home scan, okay, where you have a panel of users, they go on a shopping trip, they come back with the bags, and before they put it in the fridge, they take out the scan and they scan, right? And this has served us very well, but it lacks one thing. It's only an in-home purchase, and it lacks the whole out-of-home picture, okay? So what we have done is this, okay? So on the left-hand side, you have home scan. Importantly, integration. We are using the same consumer panel, and we are taking it mobile. Okay, so we need a device that's able to take pictures, be with you everywhere, and no-brainer, right? We are talking about smartphones. So this is not rocket science, okay? There's an app that's developed. Whenever you buy something, you pull out the app, say where you are, take a picture if it's mobile. If there's a barcode, if not, you just record it. And what is your basket size, how much you paid for it, and so on. Now, this integration is very powerful. It gives us information such as these, okay? What are consumers buying and where? So now we know how much of out-of-home purchases is happening in convenience store, for example, 1/3. And this comes from an example, a proof of concept that we did together with Coca-Cola in Thailand. And it really gave them an insight now into convenience stores, for example, okay? And where people are buying the products from. You talk about share of wallet, and now we know that a lot of the outdoor impulse purchase is really driven by foods and desserts, followed by RTD beverages. We have an insight into the specific demographics, so you can go into a specific group that you want to target and see what is their behavior like for out-of-home purchases. And hence, you can then tweak your media buy and your strategy to reach out to these demographics. And then next, we have what's in the home and what's out of home, right? So by putting the power of using the same panel across two, you're able to understand, okay, there are certain products that really we shouldn't really be spending so much money on advertising in-home, on mass media, TV and papers and so on. But really, we need to get out there, in the bus shelters at the point of sale. So this is one value that I feel is very useful to our clients now. Okay, now I'm going to take us away from the shopping trip and let's go into the mobile itself with this tool called Mobile Insights. Okay, now before I do so, let's do a little quiz, right? How well do we know our Indian smartphone consumers? Okay, so I see a number of internationals here. Maybe you can help me or help us. What do you think is the total active time that people are spending on their phone, both online and offline? All right, let's have some guesses. Anyone? Minutes, hours? Sorry? 120 minutes. Good guess, Rick. Anyone else? 232? 180? Okay. 300? Okay. So this is from somewhere in the middle of last year. I think some of you are quite close. The answer is somewhere in between. About 2.5 hours a day. And this number initially scared me. It's like, wow, we're spending more time touching our phones than we are connecting with our loved ones. But that's a reality, right? The phone is a limb, as our first speaker put it. Okay, so we are able to go in depth to look at how people are spending time on communication, entertainment, browsing, and so on. And interestingly, we see that in India, more than 1/4 of the time spent on the phone is on browsing, right? And are people still using the phone for making phone calls? Well, about 10%, thereabouts. Okay, so once you have this insight, you can work with clients and you can take it and say that you understand your clients better. Let's cut the data in different ways, right? So I'm not going to talk so much about the tool. It's passive, 24/7 accurate, privacy. All these things are taken care of. We've had the privilege of having been able to learn from this since the year 2009. To working across various countries with some clients. Okay. Later, I'm going to share about some of the learnings about building a panel and so on. Okay. You're able to then cut the data by various means, whether it's by the OS, the brand of the phone, even to the specific smartphone. Okay, and this is important when your boss comes to you and asks, should I be investing in a BlackBerry app, for example, or should we just focus on iOS and Android? Okay. We will also know when to speak to our customers. So this is like a day in a life kind of slide where you take a typical demographic and you understand how they're actually using the phone. Okay. And to really understand, okay, this is the time of the day where people are using video apps, for example, and that's when we really need to get in with our YouTube advertising. We can find a new way to reach out to our customers. Clients ask, should I be investing in video? Is the market ready? Right? And now we know that with data like this, that year on year, there's actually a big jump, okay, in the number of customers, people on the panel who are actually using video, and the market is, well, the client has to take a call whether it's ready or it's not ready, or maybe they want to wait for another year. Okay? And lastly, you talk about apps being, in selecting, if there are 5 apps that I want to invest in to advertise on, which one should I be going to? So that's where you have a currency coming in that talks about what is the reach versus the duration, versus the frequency of usage of the apps. Okay? And lastly, this is one of my favorite, it's really about catching winners early. Okay, maybe none of us in this room would have imagined how big Angry Birds, eventually became, and it's really about if I really want to connect with my customers before my competitors do, I need to know which is the next big app, and information like this would really help our clients to understand and catch the winners early. Sometimes they might choose to advertise on those apps. They might even choose to have an exclusive period, or to put those apps into their collaterals, for example. Okay, now I want to distill it to a couple of learnings when we built up the panels in these 2 areas. The first is that it is not just about the apps, it's about the panels, right? The previous speakers have shared about panels not being an easy game, and it is true. There's a lot of learnings that we need to do, and Nielsen, we have also learned it the hard way about how sometimes you build panels and they don't stick. How can we get them to be more involved? Okay, so in summary, it's just not about the apps. Second thing is about 1 + 1 is greater than 2. I think integration is really an important story here. We have been able to unlock a lot of value from the passive metering when we actually combine that with the consumer media views, which is actually how people are consuming media, what are magazines they're reading, what kind of places they're going to shop, and so on. And you combine that also with an idea of what is the smartphone user like in the market, which is from our syndicated studies. So, and I'm not the first speaker to say this today, right? You really can't have a standalone app on mobile and feel that that data is sufficient. We really need to look at it from different angles. So integration really helps us to unlock that value, right? The next thing is about taking a journey, or an unexpected journey sometimes with our clients. Okay, let me illustrate this, right? Many clients, when they get data, there's usually a lot of data, and they're very excited. It's like Christmas Day, and they open the box, and they say, and after a while, it's like, sorry, but what can I do with this data, right? And so that's where we begin the journey to say, okay, let's first start with understanding who your consumers are, okay? What they do at what time of the day, some of the slides that I showed you earlier. And then we take a look at the customer strategy and say, what's big for you this quarter, this half a year? Is it about games? Is it about video? and then you start to do a deep dive. Okay? So I think that's where you really start to unlock a lot more potential for what the tool can do for you. Next thing is, and last, is really how we can go beyond the comfort zone. I think, when we talk about mobile research, we really need to dare to dream, right? How can we make this the currency? How can we make this a lot more useful for the market? One of the ways that Nielsen looks at this is really about believing in fusion, right? About how we can take one data set, maybe from the media index or from the consumer panels, and really marry that together with the smartphone panels. And when we talk about fusion, it's really not talking about doing the same survey or multiple surveys and having them install something on their phones. It's really about taking two separate items, two separate studies, and really fusing them together. Right? So this is where, again, we need a lot of people who understand data and not just market researchers. And that's how we need to evolve as market research companies as well. Okay? So in summary, this is how I started out my career, seeing that the future is bright. This picture is similar to the last one, right? And it continues to be the same thing for me today. I feel that how we've begun to unlock the potential of mobile has just begun. Okay? There's a lot more that we can do in terms of understanding of what consumers do, right? In home, out of home, on mobile, off mobile, really by fusing the data together. Understanding what they watch on their phones, on tablets, on TVs, on smart TVs. In the future, maybe in automotive screens. There's just so much harmonization potential that can take place. And lastly, to understand what people are buying in home and out of home. Okay, so I hope that today I've been able to share with you a few key things, but if you could just take away one thing with you, and that is integration, integration, integration. So thank you. The future is bright for all of us.
Thank you, Adrian. Excellent stuff. And again, quantity, quantity, quantity. 3 speakers on the trot, really, hammering in the same theme. Questions for Adrian? There's no use being quiet because actually the food isn't ready for another 10 minutes. We will have the Q&A time. I've got a very specific one to start with, Adrian. Fantastic quantities of data. There's a real temptation when we have this much data, for those of us from a sort of science background, to then give the client lots of data. How are Nielsen going about generating insight now that there is much more data? Because if you've only got 100 interviews, it's quite easy to find out what the insight is. Right. If you've got that quantity, it's a lot harder.
I think the first starting point is not even looking at what we are measuring, but what is already available in the market, right? So many of our clients who sign up with us for products like these already have a lot of existing studies. So we want to really find out what needs to be there to fill the gap and to make it a lot more value, okay? Secondly, it's really about having conversations with the clients, speaking not just to the research managers, but really to the internal stakeholders to find out what needs to be measured and what needs to be cut out, right? We are talking about cutting it to 5-10 minute surveys. I think there's a good reason for that, okay? And lastly, I think it's about the whole process of simplification, right? If we are able to say something in one slide, why do it in 10? So, there's so much data that we all have to swim with anyway. So I think what differentiates one project or one company from another is really how we can simplify the data.
I'm going to ask the other question, and this, anybody wants to speak earlier, who spoke earlier wants to jump back in on terms of their devices. One of the comments I've occasionally had from people who've signed up to panels for passive metering, is that their battery life gets shorter. So we can monitor something like 36 different things off their mobile phone,
right?
But they won't be able to use the phone for a very large part of the day. Have you run into this problem at all?
Yeah. If I could extend on that question, there are 3 concerns, right? Privacy is number 1, okay? Second is battery life performance on the phone, and third is the cost to me, right? So this is why we, in any panel set out there, anything that's reputable, you really need to get a buy-in from the consumer. Spell it out very clearly what they are going to be in for. And really, if you can give back information to them, for example, which mobile networks is working for them and how they can optimize their usage, that would, create that buy-in from the customers, right? Battery life is something that needs to be extensively tested. You know, at least in the case of Nielsen Mobile Insights, the battery life load is actually very low. And the third one is about the data, which is the cost. So again, in the case of Nielsen Mobile Insights, we have an hourly update to the servers, and that's about 20 kilobits. So it adds up to a few megabytes per month, and that is clearly communicated upfront to the consumers, and they can upload via Wi-Fi or mobile internet. Yeah. But very good question, because this is very important when you start a panel.
And I would add a fourth important one to that, which is safety. Okay. I mean, make sure that if you're getting something to do a survey, they're not driving a car when they're busy filling in your graphical interface survey. Certainly, if any of you have taken a taxi ride in Italy and had the driver playing some game on their iPad while they're driving and they're looking at the map, it gets a little bit scary.
Yeah, I know. I had a fender bender last 3 months ago because I was texting. So first and last time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Adrian. Please, hands up.